Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Brittany.
I'm Steven.
And today we are throwing it back to 2014 to review the original John Wick movie in preparation for the third one coming out in about a week.
So before we jump into a review, we have a little bit of story time. So when we originally watched this movie, I had actually already seen this movie and I was like, oh my gosh, you have to watch this, Brittany. And so I made her sit down and we got about 15 minutes in, so there are some spoilers for this, but it's all over the marketing for all the John Wick films, so too bad for you. And then the dog dies. And Brittany was like, turn it off. I'm done. I'm done with this movie. Why did you just show me a movie about someone's dog getting killed?
It's not only a dog, it is a puppy. It is a very small, adorable puppy.
And, it is brutal in the movie. It's sad. And
it's on screen,
So we're saying that she's like, turn it off. I'm like, no, keep watching. Turn it off. No, keep watching. Turn it off.
I'm having flashbacks because was this after you introduced me to The Mist?
So we have a history of me getting her to watch movies that end up having really sad or terrible endings.
But here's the thing. I'm okay with sad and terrible endings for the most part, when they're done well. But when they're done, there are certain ones that just get to me. The Mist is one of them. And John Wick, first 15 minutes is one of them.
So, it was hilarious. Needless to say, I won that argument, though. We kept watching, and was it worth it?
It's now one of my favorite action movies, so I would say yes. But the first 15 minutes are still real rough to get through. So, with that, let's talk about what this movie is actually about besides a dog dying. For those of you unfamiliar, if for some reason you haven't watched this movie or any of the trailers for any of the other movies, John Wick is an hitman essentially, but it's not like your regular run-of-the-mill hitman. There's a whole underground network of people. There's a code. It's a whole thing. And he gets drawn back into this world after his wife dies due to some things that happen. So it's him kind of going on a revenge spree with some interpersonal things that come up along the way.
So the plot of this film is fairly straightforward, but I think it does all it needs to do. So there is John Wick. There is bad guys. Bad guys do bad things to John Wick's family. John Wick does bad things to 1,000 people. And it's awesome. I think it does all it needs to do. I don't think it needs to be overly complicated. I felt like they had a good amount of set pieces and world building where you have really intense action sequences and then you get a little bit of a break and get to learn more about the world that John Wick lives in. And I think they actually do a really good job of that.
So getting into some of the character details, talking about John Wick, played by Keanu Reeves. It's no secret Keanu Reeves is great in action movies. That's been a mainstream thought since The Matrix, I believe. And it's no difference in this one. I think that the heart of this film is that he's such a good guy who does terrible things, and that's my kryptonite. He does it for good reason, and he goes too far, but in a very controlled way. It's a really interesting look at the idea of an assassin who's also a lone wolf and also the best at what he does. I feel like that's a concept that's been done quite a few times, but the writing of this movie brings a new, fresh take on that, and I think Keanu's performance does as well.
Then one of the main antagonists of this film is Yosef Tarasov, which is played by Alfie Allen, and you may know him as Theon Greyjoy in Game of Thrones.
He's also Lily Allen's little brother.
So this is one of the few roles I feel like he's gotten outside of Game of Thrones. And it's clear that this is the point in Game of Thrones where he was being a big tool. And so it's clear they casted him because they're like, wow, this guy can really be a jerk.
But also an entitled brat, which is basically Theon in a nutshell.
And so he channels his Theon really hard and comes into this. And I think he's a good classic whiny but dangerous antagonist. And it's a lot of fun to just see him run away frantically from John Wick.
He's the son of a Russian mob boss, and so he has that I'm untouchable sense, but also is just scared shitless the whole time. It's such a fun blend. So I mentioned earlier that there is a whole underground network of hitmen, assassins, whatever you want to call them, and Ian McShane plays the leader of that, named Winston, and I love Ian McShane in this movie so much. We recently watched the new Hellboy movie that has Ian McShane in it, and rewatching John Wick recently, I was just wow, they really wasted him in Hellboy. Like, he has such a gravitas to his performance, and he's so charismatic and just has immense, like, presence on screen without doing a whole lot. I don't know. He's just great with very little. And he doesn't show up a ton in this movie, but he does play a very important role, and I think that he plays it really well.
And then we also had a surprise appearance by Willem Dafoe. I had completely forgotten he was in this film.
Same.
And I was like, oh, Willem Dafoe. And he actually has a pretty sizable role in this first one as one of John Wick's allies. And I think he serves to expand the universe, and I mean, I think he did a good job. I mostly wanted to mention him because he's such a fun surprise. Willem Dafoe sometimes takes like weird roles in weird projects, which he's always done, and this is a fun one to see him pop up in.
As this is an action film and one of my personal favorites, we wanted to touch on the action pieces of it, especially the stunt work. For those of you who may not know a lot of trivia around this movie, Keanu Reeves actually does, I think, about 90% of his own stunt work in this movie, and it is incredibly done. You can tell that he really took the time to understand how to do all of the different movements with guns and the footwork and the hand-to-hand combat. It's just absolutely phenomenal. I know he also does a lot of driving in this movie, and he does a lot of his own stunts for that as well as throughout the rest of the series, which we'll get to in further videos. But I just think that's really incredible, and it really shows through on screen. I find that a lot of action movies don't put the time into that they should. They just put cool explosion stuff on screen, and movies like this really highlight how much better it is when you spend the time and effort to get it right.
I think it really shows how much better John Wick is than some of the competition, especially in a lot of the hand-to-hand action sequences as well. Because Keanu does all of his own stuff, you end up with these really long-form takes between gunplay and hand-to-hand combat, and you get full-on like 30, 40-second clips of fighting sometimes where you just get to see the action take place. You don't miss anything because the camera never cuts away, or if it does, it's a tasteful one or two cuts to keep the flow of the film going. And it is just so superior to, I feel like, a lot of the early 2000s action films where you have like 82 takes and they're all slightly sped up to make the action seem quicker. And we're in a day and age where you can just tell, and it just brings a level of authenticity to this film that makes the action so much cooler.
Overall, we both really enjoyed this film, and we have continued to enjoy the franchise. If you are someone who enjoys action movies in any form or fashion, I really do recommend this movie if you haven't checked it out yet. It absolutely blows me away. Like I've said already, it's one of my favorite action films for the technicality of it and also the like pacing and world building in it, which gets even more later on. So I just think it's one that shouldn't be missed for action movie fans.
It's worth getting through the death of the dog. But as always, we are very interested to hear what you guys thought about this film. If you like John Wick, if you hate John Wick, let us know down in the comments section below, and make sure you leave a like on this video. It really helps us out and lets us know that you're excited for the rest of the films in our, I guess, mini little John Wick series. We're going to review both of the films and the new one when it comes out. So subscribe, stay tuned for that, and we'll see you guys on our next video.